I'm Alex Barker. I'm a research fellow from the University of Nottingham. I used to work as part of UK CTAS, which was the UK Centre for Tobacco and Alcohol Studies. I'm now a part of Spectrum, and I'm currently funded by Cancer Research UK. Okay, so I'm going to cover quite a lot of content, and I'm going to try and do it quite quickly, but some key questions that I wanted to look at is, why do we bother looking at alcohol in the media? Is it just adverts? How much is there, and how much is actually seen by people? And are there regulations to prevent this? And if there are, why aren't regulations preventing this? Because, spoiler alert, there is a lot of alcohol content. Okay, so first of all, why would we look at alcohol? So it's estimated that in the UK, per capita alcohol consumption in those over the age of 15 is 11.45 litres. And on a chart of how we're doing, it's not great. We are down here, so that bar there. So we're quite high with alcohol consumption in the UK. And this has various health consequences, including cancer, stroke, and liver disease. On top of that, 1.6 million people in the UK have some form of alcohol dependence, with alcohol causing close to 6,000 deaths, respectively, in 2018 to 2019. Hundreds of thousands of hospital admissions in that same period. And this has a large cost to the NHS, but alongside that, it has a wider cost to society as a whole. So this is something that we need to look at. Now, obviously, initiation of alcohol use at a young age is a strong risk factor for dependence in later life. So if you can stop people experimenting with alcohol at a young age, then perhaps you can prevent this morbidity and mortality in later years. So it's important to identify early avoidable causes of alcohol uptake in young people to kind of prevent this public health problem. So that's why we look at alcohol. What about the media? What's that got to do with it? Well, there's a lot of studies, and that's come up the wrong way around, but as you can see, my references will be at the end, but 7 to 25, there's a lot of studies that show that exposure to alcohol content, adverts and actual content within programs, leads to drinking uptake among non-drinking young people and increased consumption among their drinking peers. And the study that found this was a systematic review of longitudinal studies, so it's quite strong evidence to show that there's an effect here. But as I said, this evidence doesn't just cover adverts, it covers alcohol content as a whole. So it covers your things such as a Budweiser advert. I grew up in the 90s, so Was Up was a big thing, we all knew that one. But it also covers content within programs. So for example, Cersei Lannister drinking red wine in Game of Thrones, or Adam Sandler drinking Budweiser, which he tends to do in a lot of his films, or even James Bond ordering a martini shaken not stirred, might lead to alcohol experimentation and use in young people, and that might be because they're trying to model their behaviour on people that they see. So we should monitor the amount of alcohol content shown in popular media, and that's not just advertisements, but actual content within programs as well. So that's why we look at this. How do we look at this? So we can measure the frequency of content shown within programs and adverts. So literally just counting how many times you see any alcohol content. We can do interval content analyses. So this allows us to count how many times alcohol content is shown within certain time periods, so that you can work out what percentage of the program is showing alcohol content. And then you can look at the timing, which has been particularly done in sporting events. So you can time how long brands are shown on screen. I'm mostly going to focus on the interval content analysis and the timing throughout this presentation, but you can also do frequency. Okay, so we'll start with the obvious place, which is films, Similarly to the tobacco industry, the alcohol industry has used films to promote their products, traditionally in Hollywood. This clip is from Spider-Man, so I'll play this in the background whilst I carry on with the slide. And you can see there's a lot of Carlsberg here, which is interesting considering it's a teenager's film, really. So alcohol in films has often been used as a marketing tool to promote alcohol to young people. I'm sorry about the jittery video. I had to film this on my phone earlier as it stopped working on the slide. Okay, that's not coming up. But in 1997 to 1998, 8 alcohol companies placed their products in 233 films in that 1 year period. So this has a massive influence on the amount of films that come out. So alcohol content is probably shown in a wide range of films, but most of these have actually appealed to teenagers and children. And this is all to do with the fact that if you get people experimenting at a young age, you've got a customer for life. So looking at some previous studies, so Ailsa Lyons, who was a previous colleague of UK CTAS, looked at UK box office films between 1989 to 2008 and showed that 86% of films contained alcohol content. And this is pretty steady over time. But what's interesting about this was that the majority of branded content appeared in films aged 12 and 15. So the branded content was kind of aimed at that young audience to try and get them experimenting with this. Okay, so I'll move on to TV. We have some more data on films that we have coming soon. We've continued that analysis up until 2017, but I don't have the data yet fully. So I'll move on to TV where I'll focus most of this presentation. Okay, so British TVs, I mean, in the UK, 28 million British homes have at least one television, and the average viewing time in the UK is 3 hours and 47 minutes per person per day. So the actual exposure to content is bigger through TV than it would be through film. So that's why we look at this. I mean, there's a lot of time spent like that in nuclear family watching TV. But you might ask, I mean, aren't there regulations on this? So in the UK, the regulations are provided by the Ofcom Broadcasting Code for programme content, and this protects under 18s by restricting depictions of alcohol use in programmes made for children. And interestingly, that's now changed to excessive alcohol use, which I'll come back to. And preventing the glamorisation of alcohol use in programmes broadcast before the 9 PM watershed or in programmes likely to be widely seen, heard or accessed by under 18s without editorial justification, which is their kind of catch-all to try and get out of any responsibility. They say that if it's part of the story of the programme, then they can use it, which is frustrating, and I'll come back to that. They also have rules on product placement. So paid for product placement cannot occur in UK programmes. But if products are acquired at no monetary value, they can be used, which is a bit of a loophole there. And no undue prominence must be given towards a single brand. But we'll come back to that one as well. So that's programme content. What about adverts? So they're covered by the ASA, which is the Advertising Standards Authority, and their BCAP code, which states that advertisements for alcoholic drinks should not be targeted at people under 18 years of age and should not encourage immoderate or irresponsible drinking. Now, interestingly, both of these kind of highlight the irresponsible drinking, but the evidence states that there's a dose-response relationship. So it doesn't really matter the content in which it's presented in. If there's alcohol content, it's likely to lead to increased uptake. So despite this, previous evidence has shown that primetime TV is a significant source of exposure to alcohol content in under 18s, and that research was done in 2010. So when I joined UK CTAS, we were redoing that, and we looked at primetime television in 2015, and we recorded 3 weeks of programmes over a 3-month period and we looked at all programmes between 6 p.m. to 10 p.m, so before and after that watershed. And we managed from Monday to Sunday on the top five free-to-view channels, so BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5. We captured a large amount of programmes and a lot of advertisement breaks. And we used 1 minute interval coding, so where we look at 1 minute of the programme to record what content we see for all of these. And we found that 50% of adverts or trailer periods between programmes contained alcohol content. One of these months was Christmas. There was a lot of alcohol adverts in that month, but this also included other things such as Tesco adverts, for example. But shockingly, alcohol content occurred in over 50% of all programmes shown during that time, with the majority of alcohol content occurring before that 9 p.m. watershed. So when children are likely watching TV with their parents. So the majority of alcohol, occurred before the 9 p.m. watershed. Obviously, in programmes like The Simpsons, we had Duck Beer, you have your soaps, and interestingly, you have sponsorship of programmes happening on TV. So Channel 4 has Foster's sponsor a number of programmes throughout the day, and that happens on quite a few channels. The worst offenders we found were reality TV, soap operas and sports. Cooking was also high, but we only looked at a handful of cooking programmes, so I've discounted them for this. So then we continued to look at this. So we've done individual studies looking at these topics, which I'll cover, and hopefully they'll highlight some of the loopholes in the Ofcom regulation, which I spoke about earlier. So firstly, I'm going to cover soaps. Obviously, soaps in the UK feature pubs, and they all revolve around pubs, which is just interesting. So we looked at every soap that was shown over 3 weeks, over a 3-month period. So this was November, December, and January 2018 to 2019. And we looked at EastEnders, Emmerdale, Coronation Street, Hollyoaks, Home and Away, and Neighbours. And we found that alcohol content was shown in 95% of episodes and 24% of 1 minute intervals. So almost a quarter of the time that you're watching, there's alcohol on screen. But that's all well and good, but we don't know if children saw it. It's likely because of the time that they're on, but we wanted to take this a step further and kind of investigate this. So we conducted a population exposure estimate. So we gathered population figures for the UK, combined them with viewing figures and the number of appearances, and that can give us a gross impressions. So the number of times alcohol content is seen by a certain population due to these programmes. So going back to soaps, I'll come back to that picture in a minute. We found that these 3 weeks of soaps delivered 2.1 billion alcohol gross impressions to the UK population. So it was seen 2.1 billion times by the UK population, including 113 million times by children under the age of 16. Interestingly, we found evidence of product placement. I don't know if you can see that. There's numerous bottles labelled vodka, but all of a sudden in the middle of it, there's a bottle of Smirnoff. Which is interesting how that's gotten there. And if you're using fake brands such as the vodka bottles, why would you use a bottle of Smirnoff? And this becomes more apparent when you look at the genuine brands and the fictional brands that were shown in soap operas. So Maker's Mark, for example, which is a relatively unheard of in the UK bourbon, but that was seen the most throughout soaps. So it's interesting. There's something weird going on with the product placement in soap operas. And is this just a UK thing? So we compared the British soaps with the Australian soaps, and we found that there were no branded products in the Australian soaps. It was only in the UK soaps. So we took this to Ofcom, and we kind of said, well, this is seen by millions of UK children. There's something weird going on with the product placement, and we think that you should investigate it. They said that soaps are not made for children, even though children watch them. The product placement you're not allowed paid for product placement. So obviously these brands are just being acquired at no cost and used, which seems like a good way to advertise your product if you make alcohol. And because we didn't report this within 20 days of the soap's airing, Ofcom won't investigate it. So despite us having evidence of this leading to uptake and a lot of content being shown that shouldn't be shown, Ofcom didn't really want to investigate it, which just goes to show that there's loopholes in the regulation, and it's letting things like this go through. Okay, so moving on to reality TV, we did the same methods and we looked at a number of reality TV shows throughout 2018. So we looked at Celebrity Big Brother, The Only Way is Essex, Made in Chelsea, Love Island and Geordie Shore. And we found that we looked at 112 episodes of these reality TV programs. I think they were aired between January and August 2018. And alcohol content appeared in all 112 episodes, and in leading up to a half of all 1 minute intervals, and more than that in Made in Chelsea. Alcohol branding occurred in 74 intervals across 23 episodes and was most prevalent in Geordie Shore, which weirdly was almost exclusively Smirnoff vodka. And this delivered a ridiculous number of alcohol impressions to the UK population, and because these programs are popular with young people despite not being made for them, to children under the age of 16, including 47 million gross impressions of branded alcohol products, so mostly Smirnoff, and to children, and that was 15 million. We've had a small win with this because the latest series of Geordie Shore seem to blur out their bottles. This is clearly not Smirnoff, it's because it's covered up, but a small win. We seem to have highlighted it, and they seem to be doing something about it, so we'll see. And I believe I've skipped a slide. Hold on, I've had a slide go missing. Yes, reality TV. Yeah, but that's not all with reality TV. So one that we looked at there was Love Island. And we originally looked at Love Island to look at tobacco content, and we had a bit of a win with that because we managed to present our findings to Ofcom, and all of a sudden tobacco content was removed from Love Island. They seem to be promoting it. But with the alcohol side of things, so the year after we took action on the tobacco content, Love Island was sponsored by Echo Falls, which is a wine producer, and they produced this partnership to kind of sell their wine, really. So the majority of alcohol content seen in Love Island the year after the tobacco content study came out was mostly wine, which looks very similar to the Echo Falls bottles. Another clip for you, and another example is the F1 games, of championships, sorry. So you might watch this and want a Heineken, and there's a lot of Heineken. So we conduct, Heineken started sponsoring the F1 in 2016 to receive a significant exposure within their races, and to also have their title races. So some championships are called the Heineken Grand Prix, for example. So we looked at every race shown in 2018, and we used interval coding, which was quite intensive. We counted every brand that you can see on screen, and this took quite a long time. But alcohol content was seen in 51% of intervals, and this was mostly billboards around the track, obviously, but it also included celebrations at the end of the races. And this resulted in 3.9 billion alcohol impressions to the UK population, including 154 million to children. And interestingly, they were using some interesting tactics to kind of bend the rules on this. So they were using CGI branding, where they added the Heineken star onto the track. And And they were also changing billboards. So in 2017, they had billboards that said zero alcohol at the wheel. But in 2018, they changed it to Heineken. So there was some very interesting stuff going on in the 2018 F1 races. And this delivered impressions to children. So we went to Ofcom and we reported it because the CGI branding shouldn't be allowed because it's giving undue prominence to brands. And obviously it was seen by children. So Ofcom kind of said that the CGI branding is a bit naughty, but the F1 had previously been told off for using the Rolex branding, which was CGI added to the track as well. So they said that because they'd already been told off about that and their ruling came after that, they were going to let it slide. And because we didn't report it within 20 days of the races taking place, they were not going to investigate it. Which is frustrating because I can't count that many alcohol brands and record it for a whole year's worth of footage and report it within 20 days. And I don't think anyone can. And it's a problem with their investigative measures. But this is all well and good, but do people actually still watch TV? So viewing habits are changing. And younger people are watching more Netflix and Amazon Prime instant video, for example, and they're streaming their content. So Netflix now has 125 million paying subscribers worldwide. And in the UK, they have 6.1 million households that have access to Netflix and 8 million to Amazon Prime. With a fifth of younger people watching their time watching video on demand services. Mostly teenagers, but it does seem to be changing. So how relevant is alcohol content on TV, and should we be paying attention to other sources of alcohol content? So a few years ago, we looked at video on demand services. So we collected a list of the top 10 IMDb rated programs on Netflix and Amazon Prime. And we wanted to look if there were any differences between the services and between conventional TV, because there's differences in regulation. So Amazon Prime is covered by Ofcom because it's based in the UK, but Netflix is based in the Netherlands. So that's covered by the European Audiovisual Services Media Directive, which does not state alcohol anywhere in its rules. It just says that it tries to protect young people from content which might cause harm. So the UK regulation specifically mentions alcohol and tries to monitor and regulate that, whereas the European one doesn't. And we wanted to see if there was any difference in that. And the hypothesis is that Netflix would show more because that's based in the Netherlands. So we looked at 10 programs, 5 from Netflix, 5 from Amazon Prime, and we looked at 5 episodes of each program. So that resulted in 50 episodes covering 2,704 one-minute intervals. And we found that alcohol content appeared in 13% of intervals across 47 episodes, so 94% of episodes. And this looked at things like The Crown, Stranger Things, Bosch, and Narcos. And interestingly, we found that there was no significant difference between the services. So despite the UK regulation on Amazon Prime having stricter rules, it was still showing the same amount of content as Netflix. And interestingly, this content is a lot more than conventional TV, and these differences are significant. So on the left-hand side, you have video on demand services, and on the right-hand side, you have conventional TV. And as you can see, that any asterisk shows significance, but there's a significantly larger amount of alcohol content being shown on video on demand services, which are predominantly being watched by teenagers, which we know has an effect on their uptake and experimentation with alcohol use. And interestingly, there did seem to be some product placement. So specific brands appeared in specific programs. As you can see, there was hardly any. that was a whistle-stop tour of a lot of the things that we've done in the last couple of years. I hope I haven't given you way too much information. But just to conclude, alcohol content in the media is associated with subsequent experimentation and use in young people. And this is still prevalent despite the regulations, and that's because there appears to be ways around the regulations that we've shown over the last couple of years that do seem to be being used or not investigated, because there's a clause in the regulations that says editorial justification, or we'll only investigate within 20 days. So there's issues with the current regulation, and there's issues with cross-border regulation. For example, the Netflix, Amazon Prime stuff, and the sports studies, the sports programs being shown on TV. And we need to continue to monitor this. We know it has an effect, and we need to keep pushing against the regulator and against program makers to try and get something to change and to try and stop this content being shown. But we also need to monitor new types of media as and when they appear. So in the last couple of years, there's been a rise of social media, for example. We need to get onto that, and we need to monitor that. But there's also there's a couple of studies coming out now, and we are starting to look at YouTube content. And I know there has been a couple of studies looking at game content, but as I said, here's a couple of examples from social media and things that we need to get on looking at. I mean, these are fairly modern. They've been screenshotted from my phone over the last couple of days. I get quite a lot of alcohol adverts just because the work I do. And obviously they're targeting based on search history, but this is from Instagram. But then you also have brand ambassadors. So this is Ryan Reynolds, which a lot of young people know from the Deadpool films. And he promotes his own brand of gin called Aviation Gin on Instagram. You also have pop-up adverts like this appearing on Facebook, which has appeared in the last couple of days because of Black Friday. But then you also have things like Snapchat filters, which are popular with young people. So this is Captain Morgan promoting his rum to young people because you can dress up as a pirate and it's fun. But yeah, these are things that we need to continue to look at and continue to move with the times, because the alcohol industry wants to target young people because that's where the greatest effect is, and they're going to use media that appeals to young people. So we need to continue to look at this. Okay, thank you for listening. Here's a lot of references. These slides are available if you want to go through these. But yeah, thank you for listening.